My brother served in Afghanistan after 9/11 as well. So thank you.
He's
I appreciate that. He's home. He's alive. Thank goodness. So.
Good.
I wanted to ask you, as one of the females running for president, when in office, what you would do to address the epidemic with regards to domestic violence. And over the past 18 years, more women have been killed in the United States alone, of America, on this soil, than the 6,700 fallen heroes in Iraq and Afghanistan and 9/11 put together. Literally 3 women a day are murdered in America from domestic violence. The number one cause of homelessness in America is domestic violence. It is not mental illness, it is not drug addiction, it is domestic violence. My question is as the first female candidate, what would you do when you get into office, one, to start to redistribute, so there's $500 million a year that's given to the Violence Against Women Act. So as a survivor myself, and going through the system right now, what would you guys do to actually solve the housing problem? Because right now it only gives women literally like 30 to 90 days to take care of their kids, find a new job, save enough money for first, last month's rent, and then get into a place. What would you do to redistribute that? Because if I did real estate for 10 years. $500 million is a lot of money. That's enough money to buy enough real estate to house every domestic violence survivor and their children alone at this moment for 2 years and educate them so they can get back to their life and they don't have to go back to their abusers. So my question would be, what would you do to involve survivors in the conversation and as well to start to address the epidemic with this, because it's a real one.
Yeah. Oh, before you take the mic back, I'd like to just ask you, if you don't mind, since this is something that you have gone through, you have been through yourself and seen firsthand, and you've probably made connections with other people who've gone through the same thing again. What are you seeing about maybe the top glaring holes or misuse of those dollars that you think could be better used?
Thank you. That's a good question. I think so. The first thing that I would address would be, instead of funding $30 million for software systems at the police department, that $30 million should go to survivors with regards to housing and triage them and get them into long-term housing. So one of the reasons it takes a survivor 7 times to leave. One of the reasons that survivors go back, though, is because they're making a choice between either getting beat or being homeless, which are both very dangerous situations. So if we could reallocate some of the funding, or, we're doing a lot of prevention programs, which I'm for, 100%, because it's a social and cultural thing that we need to teach the youth about, because that will change behaviors and attitudes. But if we can't solve, we can't get the, make the bleeding stop first, and that's being current survivors. So let's get them housed. And I would say, so taking some of the funding that's going to like more research and special interest projects and actually using that to buy housing. So if you bought housing and you had more transitional housing, you could put people in that and then give them 2 years to go back to school to become a licensed nurse practitioner or get a certificate to become an x-ray tech, because then these women who have children will have enough money to economically take care of their kids, afford their own place, and then you can get them out of the system, because that actually gives them enough time to do that. So I'd say that's one aspect. The other aspect I would address is working with police departments. So one of the things that they found, that there's 22 indicators that make a domestic violence survivor a very high risk to become domestic homicide. So we know that one of them is strangulation. Strangulation does not leave any actual physical marks, it leaves no bruises, but it causes actual brain damage. So another thing that I would love to see the federal government do is maybe put a bill in place that would say every police department around the United States, when responding to a domestic violence call, could ask a basic question. What did your husband strangle you? Because there's not going to be bruises. And if that is a yes, when did it happen? If it happened within the last 48 hours, that person goes to the hospital and has an actual CAT scan, because then that will rule out if they have a traumatic brain injury or not. Because 1 in 4 domestic violence survivors, I am one of them, has had a traumatic brain injury that went untreated because of this problem. It is also a fact that if your husband has strangled you, you are much more likely, or you're a much higher risk to actually die from domestic homicide. So as well, to be able to address that and make sure that this person gets into safe housing and does not end up back with their abuser because their situation wasn't taken seriously because the cops didn't see marks all over their neck. So those are some of the topics, just a tip of the iceberg that I would start to address.
Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being willing to be so open and to share both your own experience as well as your thoughts through that experience on how we can better improve this terribly tragic statistic in this country. this is the approach that I will take as president. I'm not going to stand here and pretend to tell you that I know everything about every single issue that we face. But I also know that it's important that leaders in Washington, policymakers, members of my cabinet, best make those informed decisions about policies based on on-the-ground, real-time information coming from those who are most impacted in every single part of our government. The things that you're putting forward make sense. And I've spent some time visiting domestic violence shelters in my own home state of Hawaii, have had a chance to sit down and talk with women who are survivors like yourselves, many of them with very young children, and questioning to themselves, what are they going to do when they have to leave the shelter? And talking about how there are so many more women who have no place to go because there aren't enough shelters. There aren't enough beds, especially those who are willing to take children for long term. And talking about my home state, for example, and there's so many things that are linked to this. You mentioned affordable housing, really, truly affordable housing.
Yes.
That a single mom who now has no finances, no income, oftentimes no credit on her own, is supposed to be able to then go in, high cost of living, it costs maybe $1,500 for a super, super cheap studio in my home state of Hawaii a month. $1,500 a month. What to speak of, you've got a few kids, most landlords aren't going to let you bring 4 kids into a little studio apartment. But thinking through all of these things, all of the costs and needs, you see how deep the problem runs. Yeah. So then let's go to, okay, what's the solution? The federal government, the Violence Against Women's Act, provides this funding that you're talking about. But here's the issue, before we even get to the point of reapportioning that to make sure that it's most effectively helping those who need help and reducing the numbers of women who are unfortunately losing their lives because they feel they have no option. The Violence Against Women Act, unfortunately, has become a political tool in Washington.
Yes, thank
you.
you.
So as we again, this is why I talk about breaking through the hyperpartisan gridlock, because even something that for so long in this country has been universally supported by virtually every member of Congress, now is a bill that's becoming harder and harder to pass. And it's not because people are saying, well, you know, I support violence against women. Nobody's saying that. But they're using this as a bargaining chip to be able to get other pieces of legislation passed. Literally playing with people's lives.
Yes, literally, murder.
For political purposes.
Yes, thank you.
You understand how serious this is.
Yeah, I have 5 blown discs in my neck that I can't have surgery for from violent crimes, so I do understand it.
And yet you're standing here today and you're fighting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being the example. And the strength for so many others. So it's taking both of those approaches.
Thank you.
Breaking through the partisanship and really bringing this issue home so that we know that every taxpayer dollar that's going towards this is actually helping a woman find freedom.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, in the back.